They laughed when she showed up in a borrowed dress. They whispered when they saw her skin. Then one woman accidentally spilled wine on her gown and sneered, "Black girls clean, not cook." They tried to humiliate her, to remind her she didn't belong in a room of pearls and power, but what they tried to stain, she turned into strength. Years later, as rain poured and hungry families lined up for warm bread, the woman they once called nobody fed thousands. How? Did public shame at a high society ball spark an empire of quiet revenge? Stay with us to witness the betrayal, the fire, and the comeback that rose like dough. Drop a comment. Have you ever been underestimated? Hit subscribe for more stories that rise from the ashes. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom gleamed. In the afternoon sun, natural light pouring through towering windows, scattering warmth across polished marble. Lena Harper, 30, stood at the edge of the 2018 Dazzle ball, her signature dark hair cascading like a dark river down her back, shimmering against the sapphire dress she'd borrowed from a friend. The gown hugged her deep brown skin, its hue a quiet rebellion against the sea of pale silks and ostentatious pearls. Beside her, Ethan Caldwell, heir to a real estate dynasty, flashed a smile as practiced as his tailored tuxedo, his arm loosely circling her waist. Lena's fingers grazed her mother's ring on her left hand, a humble relic from her late mother, a Harlem cook who'd fed the hungry with love baked into every loaf. "You're quiet tonight?" Ethan murmured, his eyes already chasing a senator's handshake across the room, his attention as fleeting as the jazz band's melody, swaying lazily in the bright daylight. Lena forced a smile, her heart thudding. Against the weight of the room, the Dazzle Ball was no charity gala. It was a stage for New York's elite to flaunt their power under the guise of fundraising. She'd spent weeks preparing, smoothing her hair to a glossy sheen, hoping to blend into Ethan's world. But every glance from the crowd felt like a blade, slicing through her borrowed elegance. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "You're enough, Lena. Always." She clutched the ring tighter, its cool metal grounding her. "I'm fine," she whispered, though the lie tasted bitter. Ethan nodded absently, his focus on a cluster of men in bow ties, their laughter loud and careless. As she scanned the room, she caught the eye of a woman in a diamond tiara who whispered something to her companion, both smirking. The air shifted, heavy with malice as Cecilia Caldwell, Ethan's mother, glided toward them. Her pearl gown gleamed like armor, her necklace a constellation of wealth. "Ethan, darling," she purred, her voice syrupy but sharp, ignoring Lena as if she were a shadow. "The governor's table is waiting. You mustn't keep him." Her eyes flicked to Lena, narrowing to slits. "Oh, Lena, you're present." The word landed like a slap, loud enough to turn heads. Lena's throat tightened, but she steadied herself, her hair brushing her shoulders as she squared them. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Caldwell," she said, her voice calm despite the storm inside. Cecilia's smile was a blade, cold and precise. "Having you? Dear, you're Ethan's our guest, a baker at the plaza, that dress screams thrift shop, and that hair," she paused, her lips curling, "straightened to fit in, I presume." "It's not enough." A ripple of laughter spread, cruel and deliberate, from the crowd. Lena's cheeks burned, her hair suddenly feeling like a spotlight rather than a shield. A man in a velvet jacket muttered, "She thinks she's one of us?" Another, louder, added, "Black girls don't belong here." The words stung, each one a reminder of the world she'd dared to enter. Ethan shifted beside her, his silence deafening. "Ethan, please," Lena hissed, her voice barely audible, pleading for him to stand with her. But his eyes darted away, fixed on the floor. Cecilia leaned closer, her voice a venomous whisper. "You're a nobody, Lena. A black baker with no place in our circle. Ethan needs a partner who belongs, not a charity case with flour on her hands and dreams too big for her skin." The word nobody seared Lena's soul, louder than the clink of champagne flutes. She wanted to scream, to tell them of her mother's recipes, the nights she'd kneaded dough until her fingers ached, the dream of feeding Harlem with love. But her voice caught, trapped behind the weight of their stares. A socialite in a sequined gown, emboldened by Cecilia's cruelty, stepped forward, accidentally spilling red wine across Lena's dress. "Oops," she giggled, her voice dripping with mockery. "Dark skin's better for scrubbing floors than baking cakes, sweetheart." The crowd erupted in snickers. People raised their phones, snapping pictures under the bright afternoon light. "This'll go viral. Harlem baker flops at Dazzle ball." Lena's vision blurred, the wine staining her dress like blood, her hair veiling her tear-streaked cheeks as she tried to hide her trembling. Ethan finally spoke, his tone as cold as the marble beneath their feet. "Lena, she's right, we're done. You don't belong in my world." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that echoed like thunder. Lena's heart shattered, the pieces sharp and jagged. "Here, now," she choked, her voice breaking. She turned as she faced him. Ethan shrugged, his eyes empty. "You were a mistake." The columnist's camera zoomed, his followers already flooding social media with captions. "Thrift shop baker dumped at Dazzle ball." And she thought that straight hair made her elite? Lena's world spun, the room closing in. She turned to flee, her heel catching on the floor, her copper ring slipping from her finger and clinking onto the marble, a small, defiant sound. In the chaos, Lena knelt, tears streaming down her face, her hair pooling around her as she reached for the ring. Cecilia smirked, her voice cutting through the din. "You're a spectacle, dear. Run along." The crowd parted, their laughter a chorus of scorn, some whispering, "Black girls always overreach." Lena's fingers closed around the ring, its familiar weight her only anchor. A soft voice broke through the noise. "Here," said Mr. Amos the doorman, his weathered hand steady as he helped her stand, his eyes warm with kindness. "Don't let their poison dim your light, child." Lena nodded, gripping her mother's keepsake, her hair falling across her tear-streaked face as she stumbled toward the exit, the ballroom's glow fading behind her. Outside, Manhattan's afternoon air hit her like a slap, the city's towers, blurring through her tears, the afternoon sun still high but distant. Her dress, soaked with wine, clung to her skin, her hair damp from the mist. The laughter still echoed in her mind, the words nobody and Black Baker carving wounds. Deeper than she'd ever known. Social media was already ablaze, posts mocking her hair, her skin, her audacity to dream. But as she stood under a flickering streetlight, her mother's ring gleamed on her finger, a silent promise. Her mother's voice whispered, "You're enough." Lena's tears dried, replaced by a fire that burned hotter than their cruelty. They'd mocked her, broken her, but she'd rise, not for their approval, but for herself, for her mother, for every soul they'd dismissed. She'd bake a legacy so vast, their laughter would choke on the dust of her triumph. That evening, Harlem wrapped Lena Harper in its restless hum, the city's pulse a faint echo of the laughter that had chased her from the Plaza Hotel's ballroom just weeks ago. Her familiar curtain of confidence, still glossy despite the weight of that night, swayed as she walked the cracked sidewalks of her childhood streets, her mother's ring on her finger glinting under streetlights. At 30, Lena carried the sting of Cecilia Caldwell's words, "Nobody, Black Baker," like shards of glass in her chest. But her mother's voice, warm and steady, rose above the pain. "Bread for every soul." Those words, whispered over steaming ovens in a cramped Harlem kitchen, were Lena's inheritance, more precious than the wealth of Ethan's world. She stopped outside a shuttered storefront, its faded sign barely legible. Her savings, scraped from years of side gigs, could just cover the lease. This was her chance to build something, Lena's Hearth. Lena's childhood flickered in her mind like an old film reel. She saw herself at 10, her hair long even then, braided by her mother's gentle hands, watching as Mama kneaded dough in their tiny apartment. Her mother, a community cook, had fed Harlem's hungry with cornbread and love, her laughter filling the air as she taught Lena to roll pastry. "You bake with your heart, child," she'd said, slipping her mother's ring onto Lena's finger before cancer stole her away. That ring, now warm against Lena's skin, held those lessons. Food wasn't just sustenance. It was a bridge, a promise. The Dazzle ball had tried to break her, but Lena wouldn't let their cruelty snuff out her mother's dream. She signed the lease the next morning, her hair tied high in a bun, flour dusting her hands as she envisioned a bakery that would feed both bodies and souls. Lena's Hearth opened on a chilly November dawn, its wooden sign hand-painted with a heart curled around a loaf. The shop was small, its walls peeling, but the scent of fresh bread spilled onto the street, drawing curious neighbors. Lena, her hair gleaming under the shop's warm lights, worked alone, baking recipes her mother had etched into her memory: sweet potato rolls, honey cornbread, peach cobbler that melted on the tongue. She launched Bread for Every Soul, a vow to give free bread each afternoon to the homeless, inspired by her mother's kitchen. The first night, a line formed: old men with weary eyes, mothers clutching children, all taking warm loaves. With murmurs of thanks, Lena's heart swelled, but the memory of Cecilia's sneer, charity case, lurked, daring her to falter. Trouble came swiftly. A wiry man in a suit stepped into the shop one afternoon, his gaze lingering on Lena's dark skin and straight hair with a curl of disdain. "Nice place," he said, his tone flat, "but I don't buy from black bakers. Who knows what's in this stuff?" Lena's fingers tightened around a tray of rolls, her hair brushing her shoulders as she leaned forward. "My bread's clean as my conscience," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "Taste it or leave." He scoffed, tossing $1 onto the counter and walking out, his words a fresh wound. Lena brushed it off, but the sting of prejudice, so raw after the Dazzle ball, gnawed at her. She'd faced it before, customers doubting her hygiene, her skill because of her skin, but it never dulled. Worse followed. Victor, a rival restaurateur who ran a glossy diner nearby, saw Lena's growing crowd as a threat. He spread rumors that her bread was baked in a filthy kitchen, whispering to locals that a black woman like her can't run a clean shop. Sales dipped, and Lena's heart sank as she scrubbed counters late at night, her face tense, that humble loop of memory catching the dim light. She was pouring her soul into this place, but doubt crept in. Had Cecilia been right? Was her dream too big? One evening, as she handed out free loaves, a young boy, no older than 8, hugged her. "Leg, your bread's like my grandma's," he said, eyes bright. Lena blinked back tears, the ring warm on her finger. She wasn't done fighting. Victor's malice escalated at the weekly farmer's market, where Lena set up a stall. She readied herself, baskets of cornbread drawing a small crowd. He sauntered over, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "Folks, you trust this bread? Her shop's a health hazard." Lena's pulse raced, the memory of wine staining her dress flashing through her mind. She stepped forward, her voice clear, cutting through the murmurs. "I bake with my heart, Victor, not with lies. My bread feeds people you'd never look at twice." A few shoppers nodded, one clapping softly, but Victor smirked, undeterred. "You'll crash and burn, girl," he said, the word girl dripping with condescension. Lena's hands shook, but she held his gaze. She stood defiant against her defiant stance. That night, alone in the shop, Lena sank onto a stool, flour dusting her apron, her hair loose and framing her face. The copper ring gleamed as she turned it, her mother's words echoing, "You're enough." She thought of the boy at the market, the faces in line each evening, hungry for more than bread. They believed in her, even when she doubted herself. The Dazzle ball had tried to define her. Nobody, black baker, charity case. But those were their words, not hers. Lena stood, tying her hair back, and pulled a batch of dough from the fridge. She'd knead through the pain, bake through the prejudice, and build Lena's Hearth into something unbreakable. Victor's lies, Cecilia's cruelty, the world's doubts, they'd all taste her triumph soon enough. Winter's chill seeped into Lena Harper's bones as she stood alone in Lena's Hearth, the Harlem bakery she'd poured her soul into. The midnight silk framing her face, tied high in a weary bun, caught the flicker of a single bulb, its light barely warming the peeling walls. At 30, Lena was no stranger to struggle, but the scars of the Dazzle ball, Cecilia Caldwell's. Nobody? The wine-stained dress, the crowd's laughter, burned fresh, mingling with new wounds from her fledgling dream. The copper ring on her finger, her mother's last gift, glinted as she kneaded dough, its rhythm a prayer against the growing darkness. Lena's Hearth had sparked hope with its Bread for Every Soul program, feeding Harlem's hungry each evening. But hope was fragile, and trouble loomed like storm clouds over the city's restless streets. The bakery's heart, its ancient oven, coughed and sputtered one gray morning, its heat fading as Lena prepared a batch of sweet potato rolls. She cursed under her breath, her hair slipping from its bun to frame her sweat-dampened face. The repair estimate was a gut punch, $2,000 she didn't have. Her savings were gone, sunk into the lease and flour sacks, and the shop's meager sales couldn't bridge the gap. Lena's fingers tightened around her mother's ring, her mother's voice whispering, "You're enough." But doubt crept, in cold and insidious. Had Cecilia been right? Was she a fool to dream so big, a black baker daring to challenge a world that mocked her skin? She pushed the thought away, tying her hair back, but the oven's silence mocked her resolve. Victor, the rival restaurateur who'd spread lies about her filthy kitchen, sensed her weakness. His diner, with its neon sign and polished counters, thrived while Lena's Hearth faltered. He appeared at her doorstep one evening, his smirk as sharp as his pressed suit. "Struggling, huh?" he said, eyeing her hair and dark skin with a sneer. "Sell me the shop, girl. A black woman like you can't keep this going." The word girl dripped with condescension, echoing the Dazzle ball's cruelty. Lena's pulse raced and she turned as she stepped forward. "My shop's not for sale, Victor. I bake for people, not profit." He laughed, low and cruel. "You'll beg me when you're broke." The door slammed behind him, but his words lingered, a poison seeping into her resolve. Worse came at the farmer's market where Lena's stall, piled with cornbread and cobbler, drew fewer faces. Each week, Victor's rumors had taken root. Locals whispered about unclean bread, their glances heavy with doubt. One woman, clutching a purse, sniffed a roll and muttered, "I don't trust black bakers. Probably cut corners." Lena's heart sank, her hair brushing her shoulders as she forced a smile. "Try it free," she offered, her voice steady despite the sting. The woman walked away, leaving Lena's tray untouched. The band that held her fire felt heavy, its promise fading. She'd faced prejudice before, customers questioning her hygiene, her worth. But this felt personal, a campaign to erase her. Victor's shadow loomed, his diner's lights mocking her from across the street. A new blow struck when a city health inspector, a stern man with a clipboard, arrived unannounced. "Complaints about sanitation," he said, his eyes lingering on Lena's skin, her hair, as if they were evidence of neglect. She knew Victor's hand in this. His connections ran deep. "Check anything you want," Lena said. She readied, herself, flour dusting her hands. The inspector poked at pipes, scrutinized shelves, his pen scratching ominously. "Places like this," he said, "often fail standards." The implication was clear. Places meant her, a black woman daring to own something. Lena offered him a warm roll, her voice calm. "Taste what I make." He hesitated, then bit, his face softening for a moment before he grunted and left. The report came days later. Minor violations, no closure, but the ordeal drained her spirit. The darkest night came when Lena's heart was broken into. She arrived at dawn, her hair loose, to find the back door splintered, glass crunching under her boots. Her mother's recipe book, a tattered journal of handwritten love, was gone, stolen, she knew, by Victor's hand. The loss cut deeper than the shattered window. Those recipes were her mother's soul, the heart of Lena's Hearth. She sank to the floor, tears falling, her hair pooling around her as she clutched her mother's ring. "Why, Mama?" she whispered. The shop felt hollow. Its warmth stolen. Social media buzzed with Victor's allies. One post sneering, Black baker's shop trashed, guess she's done. Lena's chest ached, the Dazzle ball's nobody echoing louder than ever. But a spark flickered in the ruin. As Lena swept glass, a familiar face appeared. Jasper, a homeless man who came nightly for free bread. His hands trembled, but his eyes were fierce. "I saw Victor's guy near here last night," he said. "Don't let him win, Miss Lena." His words, rough but earnest, pierced her despair. Lena stood tying her hair back, her inheritance in metal catching the morning light. She couldn't replace her mother's book, but she could rebuild its spirit. That afternoon, she posted a video online, her voice raw but resolute, her hair framing her face. "They stole my recipes," she said, "but not my heart. I'm sharing everyone online. Food's for everyone, not for hiding." She listed her mother's cornbread recipe, her hands steady, defiance in every word. The video spread like wildfire, Harlem's heart beating through every share. Locals flooded the shop, not just for bread, but for Lena, their neighbor, their fighter. A teenage girl, braids swinging, bought a cobbler and said, "You're like my auntie, never giving up." Lena's throat tightened, her mother's ring warm against her skin. The crowd wasn't huge, but it was enough to fix the door, to keep the oven's ghost alive. Victor's rumors faltered as people tasted her truth, each bite a rebuke to his lies. The inspector's visit, the break-in, the market's cold shoulders, they'd tried to bury her, but Lena was nobody. She was her mother's daughter, baking through the dark, her hair a banner of resilience, her dream a seed that refused to die. Spring sunlight spilled through the windows of Lena's hearth, bathing the Harlem bakery in a golden glow that felt like a promise kept. Lena Harper, now 31, stood behind the counter, locks glistening in the light, gleaming like polished ebony, tied loosely to keep flour from its strands. The copper ring on her finger caught the light as she slid a tray of honey cornbread into the oven, its scent weaving through the air. Months ago, this shop had been a battleground. Broken glass, stolen recipes, Victor's lies threatening to bury her dream. But Lena, forged in the fire of the Dazzle ball's cruelty and Harlem's hunger, had fought back, sharing her mother's recipes online and reigniting the community's love. The scars of being called nobody, a black baker, unfit for greatness still lingered, but today, Lena's Hearth was no longer just a shop, it was a beacon. The viral video of Lena's defiance had shifted the tide. Harlem's streets buzzed with her name, neighbors crowding the bakery not just for peach cobbler, but for the woman who'd refused to break. A New York Times reporter, drawn by the story, visited on a bustling Saturday, her pen flying as Lena, hair swaying, handed free loaves to a line of grateful faces. The article, "Harlem's Baker Feeds Souls, Not Just Stomachs," hit newsstands in 2019, painting Lena as a hero who turned pain into purpose. Overnight, Lena's Hearth became a sensation, its Bread for Every Soul program feeding thousands, monthly. Lena expanded, opening new shops in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, each with hand-painted signs echoing her mother's heart. Her long hair, once mocked at the Dazzle ball, now framed her face in photos, a symbol of resilience. But growth brought new battles. Cecilia Caldwell, Ethan's mother and a power broker on New York's Culinary Council, caught wind of Lena's. Yummy from her Manhattan penthouse, she wielded influence like a scepter, and Lena's success stung her pride. When Lena applied to showcase Lena's Hearth at the city's prestigious food festival, a Brooklyn charity event, Cecilia moved to block her. At a council meeting, her voice dripped with disdain. Lena Harper, a black baker with a few viral posts? She's an amateur, not festival material. The words relayed to Lena by a sympathetic council aide echoed the Dazzle ball's venom. Lena's fingers tightened around her copper ring, her hair falling across her shoulders as she paced. The shop. Cecilia's shadow loomed, but Lena wasn't the trembling woman in a wine-stained dress anymore. Lena fought back with fire. She called a press conference outside her Harlem shop, her hair shining under the spring sun, her voice steady but fierce. "Cecilia Caldwell says I'm an amateur," she said, But I feed the people she's never looked at twice. Harlem's hungry, Brooklyn's forgotten. My bread's for them, not her approval. The crowd, a mix of locals and reporters, erupted in cheers, one woman shouting, "You tell her, Lena." Social media exploded. Hashtags like "So Lena's Heart" and "So Feed the People" trending. Cecilia's allies squirmed, her influence cracking under the weight of public outcry. The council relented, granting Lena a prime spot at the festival. But Lena knew Cecilia's pride wouldn't yield so easily. This was war, waged not with wealth but with heart. Inside Lena's heart, the fight took new forms. A wealthy investor, smelling profit, offered to buy the bakery chain, promising millions but demanding Lena scale back, bread for every soul. His eyes flicked to her dark skin, her hair, his tone patronizing. Charity's nice, but black-owned. Businesses need to focus on revenue, not handouts. Lena's jaw tightened and she turned as she leaned forward. My mother fed people with nothing. I won't stop for your money. He left, muttering about stubborn women. But Lena stood firm, her mother's ring a reminder of her roots. She wasn't building an empire for profit. She was building her mother's legacy, one loaf at a time. A spark of joy came unexpectedly, cutting through the tension. One evening, as Lena handed out free bread, a group of Harlem kids led by a girl with bright eyes arrived with a surprise. They'd choreographed a street dance to thank her, their moves sharp and joyful outside the shop. The girl, no older than 12, grinned. "Your bread's our dinner, Miss Lena. We wanted to give back." Lena, her hair loose after a long day, knelt, tears pricking her eyes. "You're my heroes," she said, hugging the girl. The crowd clapped, phones capturing the moment, and the video went viral, dwarfing Cecilia's snubs. Lena's heart swelled, her mother's ring warm against her skin. These kids, this community, they were why she fought. Yet prejudice lingered, sharp as ever. At a Queen shop opening, a customer, a middle-aged man in a polo shirt, sneered as Lena offered a sample. "Black bakers always skimp on quality," he said, loud enough for others to hear. Lena's hair brushed her shoulders as she met his gaze. "Taste it," she said, handing him a cornbread square. He bit, his face betraying surprise, but he walked away without a word. The slight stung, but Lena brushed it off, her focus on the line of smiling faces. She'd learned to let hate slide, to let her bread speak louder than their words. The band that held her fire gleamed, her mother's voice whispering, "You're enough." As the food festival neared, Lena prepared with relentless drive. She trained her small team, she readied herself, flour dusting her hands, to bake thousands of loaves for Brooklyn's hungry. The festival wasn't just a stage, it was her chance to prove Cecilia wrong, to show the world what a nobody could do. Late at night, alone in the shop, Lena looked at the hand-painted sign, its heart curled around a loaf. To ball, Victor's lies, the investor's greed. They'd tried to bury her, but Lena's hearth was rising, fueled by Harlem's love and her mother's dream. Her long hair fell across her face as she smiled. Her mother's ring a quiet vow. She'd feed the world, and no one, not Cecilia, not prejudice, would stop her. Brooklyn's waterfront pulsed with life under a bruised sky. The 2025 Food Festival, a riot of color and scent that drew thousands to its charity embrace. Lena Harper, now 32, stood at the heart of it, locks glistening in the light, cascading like a dark waterfall over a crimson dress she'd designed herself, its silk hugging her deep brown skin. The copper ring on her finger gleamed as she surveyed her team's sprawling booth, piled high with cornbread, peach cobbler, and sweet potato rolls. Lena's Hearth wasn't just a vendor, it was the festival's lead sponsor, a title wrested from Cecilia Caldwell's grasp after Lena's defiant press conference. The scars of the Dazzle ball 7 years ago, nobody. Black Baker still whispered in her mind. But today, Lena was no longer the woman in a wine-stained dress. She was a force, her hair a crown, her bakery a beacon feeding Harlem, Brooklyn, and beyond. The festival buzzed with anticipation, its mission to feed Brooklyn's hungry aligning with Lena's own. Her booth, draped in warm yellow banners, drew crowds eager for free loaves from Bread for Every Soul. Lena's long hair swayed as she handed out rolls, her smile steady despite the weight of eyes, some admiring, others skeptical. Cecilia Caldwell arrived, her silver gown a stark contrast to the festival's earthy vibe, her presence a reminder of old wounds. She paused at Lena's booth, her lips pursed, eyes flicking to Lena's hair and skin with a familiar disdain. "Quite the spectacle," Cecilia said, her voice low but sharp. "A black baker playing savior, how quaint." Lena's fingers brushed her mother's ring, her voice calm but edged. "I feed people, Mrs. Caldwell. What do you do besides judge?" The crowd stirred, sensing tension, but Lena's focus shifted as Ethan Caldwell, her ex, approached. Once, the golden heir, he was now a shadow, his restaurant chain crumbling under bad deals. His eyes, once cold, held a flicker of desperation. "Lena," he said, forcing a smile, "your brand's hot. Let's partner. My name could boost you." Lena's hair fell across her shoulder as she leaned forward, her gaze unflinching. "Kindness isn't for sale, Ethan. You chose your world over me once. Stay there." The crowd murmured, some clapping, as Ethan's face reddened. Cecilia's jaw tightened, but before she could speak, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. The air grew heavy, and Lena's heart sank as raindrops began to fall, scattering festival goers. The storm hit like a vengeance, rain lashing the waterfront, threatening to drown the festival's purpose. Lena's booth, exposed to the elements, risked ruin. Thousands of loaves meant for the hungry now soaked. Her long hair clung to her, face the crimson dress heavy with water, but Lena refused to falter. "We keep going," she shouted, rallying her team. She grabbed tarps, her hair dripping as she climbed onto a table, securing covers with volunteers. The crowd, huddled under tents, watched in awe as Lena, soaked and relentless, handed out bread under makeshift shelters. A man in a slicker sneered, his voice carrying over the rain. "Black woman thinks she's a hero. This is a stunt." Lena spun, her hair whipping in the wind, her voice cutting through the storm. "I feed souls, not egos. Take a loaf or leave." The moment, captured by a bystander's phone, went viral within hours. Lena's Hearth trended, clips of Lena under the rain, hair plastered, dress clinging, eyes blazing, flooding social media. "She's feeding Brooklyn in a hurricane," one post read. The crowd, inspired, joined her, volunteers forming a human chain to pass out bread to the homeless, to families, to anyone who needed it. Lena's heart pounded, her mother's ring a steady warmth against her skin. Her mother's voice echoed, "Bread for every soul." This was her mother's dream, alive in the storm, defying Cecilia's scorn and the world's prejudice. The rain slowed, but Lena's booth remained a lighthouse, its yellow banners soggy but proud, feeding thousands as the festival roared back to life. Cecilia, drenched under a failing umbrella, watched in silence, her silver gown dulled by the rain. For the first time her eyes held something new, shock, perhaps shame. Lena caught her gaze but turned away, her hair dripping as she handed a loaf to an elderly woman who whispered, "God bless you, child." The crowd's cheers grew, drowning out the storm's last grumbles. A local news crew, braving the weather, approached Lena, their camera rolling. "Ms. Harper, you've saved this festival," the reporter said. Lena, her hair framing her face, smiled softly. "I didn't save it. These people did. Harlem, Brooklyn, everyone who believed in me." The copper ring glinted as she spoke, her words a quiet rebuke to Cecilia's world. A final spark lit the night. As Lena's team served the last loaves, a group of kids from Harlem, the same ones who'd danced for her months ago, ran up, their faces bright despite the rain. The leader, a girl with a gap-toothed grin, held out a soggy drawing, a heart curled around a loaf like Lena's sign. "You're our hero, Miss Lena," she said. Lena knelt, her crimson dress pooling in the mud, her hair wet against her cheeks, and hugged the girl, Tears mixed with rain, her mother's ring warm on her finger. The crowd clapped, phones flashing, capturing a moment stronger than any storm. Cecilia turned away, her silhouette fading into the crowd, her power eclipsed by Lena's heart. Lena stood. She stood tall in the fading rain, the festival alive around her. The Dazzle ball, Victor's lies, the investors' greed. They'd all tried to break her, but Lena's Hearth had risen. Not just a bakery, but a movement. She'd faced Cecilia's scorn, Ethan's opportunism, and a storm's wrath, proving her mother's truth. Food was love, and love could conquer anything. As the crowd chanted her name, Lena touched her mother's ring, her eyes on the horizon. The festival was her stage, but the world was her canvas, and she'd bake it full of light. The Brooklyn waterfront, still damp from the storm that had tested Lena's heart, glowed under the soft light of a new dawn in 2025. Lena Harper, 32, stood outside her festival booth, her hair now dry and cascading like a dark ribbon over a simple sweater. The crimson dress of the previous night folded away. Her deep brown skin caught the morning's warmth. Her mother's ring on her finger a quiet anchor, as she packed up the last of the bakery's supplies. The food festival had been her triumph, defying rain, Cecilia Caldwell's scorn, and Ethan's opportunism to feed thousands. Viral videos of her standing resolute in the downpour, hair plastered to her face, had crowned her Harlem's hero. But as the festival's echoes faded, Lena felt a new weight. The past, sharp with the Dazzle ball's wounds, demanded reckoning. Lena's Hearth was no longer just a bakery. It was a movement, its Bread for Every Soul program a lifeline for Brooklyn's hungry. Yet Cecilia's words from the festival, a black baker playing savior, gnawed at Lena, echoing the 2018 ballroom where she'd been branded nobody. She'd faced prejudice before, from Victor's lies to customers' sneers, but Cecilia's cruelty was personal, a blade wielded with the precision of old money. As Lena loaded crates, she turned, and a shadow fell across the booth. Cecilia stood there, her silver hair impeccable, her eyes no longer sharp, but hesitant. "Lena," she said, voice low. "We need to talk." Lena's fingers tightened, a round warmth pulsing from her finger, her hair brushing her shoulders as she straightened. "What's left to say, Mrs. Caldwell? You made your feelings clear." Cecilia's face, usually a mask of hauteur, cracked with something raw. "I was wrong," she said, the words heavy as if pulled from deep within. "At the festival, watching you in that storm, I saw my mistake. I judged your skin, your dreams, because I was afraid of what you represent." Lena's heart raced, her mother's ring warm against her skin. Cecilia, the woman who'd orchestrated her humiliation, was apologizing. "Afraid?" Lena asked, her voice steady but edged. Cecilia nodded, her gaze dropping. "You're everything I wasn't. Allowed to be, free, fearless, real. I envied that and I hurt you for it." The confession hung between them, fragile as morning mist. But Lena's wounds ran deep, the memory of wine on her dress, of "black girls don't belong," still vivid. Lena's hair fell across her face as she turned away, her mother's voice whispering, "Bread for every soul." Forgiveness wasn't easy, but Lena knew its power. "Words don't erase pain," she said, facing Cecilia, her hair a dark frame to her resolve. "But you can act. Join Bread for Every Soul. Help feed the people you ignored." Cecilia's eyes widened, then softened. "I will," she said, a promise Lena didn't fully trust but chose to accept. As Cecilia walked away, her silhouette smaller against the waterfront, Lena felt a shift, not closure, but a crack in the wall between past and present. Lena's journey took her back to Harlem, to the community kitchen where her mother had once baked for the hungry. The old brick building, its walls etched with decades of love, stood unchanged. Lena, her hair tied loosely, stepped inside, the scent of stale flour stirring memories of her childhood, her mother's hands guiding hers, her hair then in braids, laughter filling the air. Mr. Amos, the doorman who'd saved her ring at the Dazzle ball, sat at a table, now retired but volunteering. "Miss Lena," he said, his eyes crinkling, "my grandkids talk about you nonstop. You're their hero." Lena smiled, her hair brushing her shoulders, her mother's ring glinting. "They're mine," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Amos's words grounded her, a reminder that her fight wasn't just against Cecilia's world, but for her own. A new threat emerged, sharp and calculated. A food conglomerate, scenting Lena's Hearth success, offered to buy her chain, but with a catch: end the free bread program. The executive, a man with a slick smile, met Lena at her Harlem shop, his eyes flicking to her dark skin, her hair, his tone laced with condescension. "Black-owned businesses need to prioritize profit," he said. "Charity's a liability." Lena's hair swayed as she leaned forward, her voice ice. "My mother fed people with nothing. I won't betray that for your millions." He left, but whispers followed. Ethan, desperate to claw back relevance, was advising the conglomerate, feeding them strategies to pressure Lena. The betrayal stung, echoing his abandonment 7 years ago. Lena fought back with Harlem's heart. She organized a Bread for Every Soul event, inviting hundreds to bake together at her shop. Her long hair was tied back, flour dusting her hands as she guided neighbors through her mother's cornbread recipe. The event, live-streamed, drew thousands online, hashtags like Lena's Hearth flooding social media. A woman, her voice trembling, shared how Lena's bread had kept her family fed during eviction. The crowd cheered, their unity a shield against the conglomerate's greed. Lena's hair fell loose as she spoke to the camera, her eyes fierce. "They want my shops, but not my soul. This is for Harlem, for my mother." The conglomerate backed off, Ethan's influence crumbling under the weight of community love. As night fell, Lena stood alone in the shop, her hair framing her face, her mother's ring a quiet vow. Cecilia's apology, Amos's pride, Harlem's embrace. They didn't erase the Dazzle ball's pain, but they reshaped it. Lena wasn't just facing her past. She was rewriting it, proving that a black baker could build more than bread. She could build bridges. The fight wasn't over, but Lena's heart was stronger, its light brighter, and she'd carry her mother's dream forward, no matter who tried to dim it. Harlem's summer sun bathed Lena Harper in a golden embrace as she stood before a brick building, its fresh paint gleaming with promise. At 32, her familiar curtain of confidence flowed like a dark river down her back, catching the light. As she surveyed the sign above, Lena's Hearth Training Center. The copper ring on her finger, her mother's last gift, pulsed with warmth, a silent echo of the woman who'd baked love into every loaf. Lena's Hearth had risen from the ashes of the Dazzle ball's cruelty, from Victor's lies and Cecilia's scorn, to become a beacon feeding thousands across New York. Cecilia's apology and the community's embrace had lightened Lena's heart. But today, in 2025, she was building something greater, a legacy to honor her mother, a Harlem cook who'd fed the hungry with nothing but grit and grace. The training center, set to open that afternoon, was Lena's boldest dream yet, a place to teach baking and life skills to Harlem's youth, free of charge. Its walls, once crumbling, now held gleaming ovens and wooden tables, a mural of a woman holding a tray of bread, her mother's likeness, gracing the entrance. Lena's hair swayed as she adjusted a tray of peach cobbler, her deep brown skin glowing with purpose. The center wasn't just a building, it was her mother's spirit reborn, a defiance of the voices that had called Lena nobody, a black baker unfit for greatness. Yet as the opening neared, a familiar unease stirred, the weight of proving her worth not to Cecilia's world, but to her mother's memory. Trouble brewed, sharp and deliberate. A local tabloid, hungry for scandal, published a hit piece. Black Baker's Charity, publicity stunt or real deal. The article, laced with veiled racism, questioned Lena's motives, suggesting her free bread program was a ploy for fame. "Can a black woman from Harlem rustle this?" it sneered. Lena's fingers tightened around her mother's ring, her face tense as she read the words in her shop. The sting of prejudice from the Dazzle ball to Victor's rumors resurfaced, but this cut deeper. It targeted her mother's dream. Social media buzzed, some defending Lena, others echoing the tabloids' doubt. Lena's heart ached, but her mother's voice whispered, "You're enough." Lena fought back with action. At the center's opening, she stood on a makeshift stage, her hair shining under the sun, her voice steady but fierce. "They call this a stunt," she said, addressing a crowd of Harlem neighbors, youth, and reporters. "But my mother fed people with nothing. This center's for her, for you, for every kid told they're not enough." The crowd roared, their applause drowning out the tabloid's venom. Lena announced a scholarship fund in her mother's name, offering full support for any trainee pursuing culinary dreams. Her hair swayed as she spoke, her mother's ring glinting, a symbol of unbroken resolve. The mural behind her, her mother's face serene, seemed to nod in approval. A surprise lifted the day's weight. Cecilia Caldwell arrived, uninvited, but purposeful, her usual elegance softened by a simple blouse. The crowd murmured, remembering her role in Lena's past pain. Cecilia approached Lena, her eyes earnest. "I'm here to help," she said, offering a check for the scholarship fund. "Your mother's legacy. It's humbling." Lena's hair brushed her shoulders as she hesitated, the Dazzle ball's wine-stained dress flashing in her mind. But forgiveness, she'd learned, was strength. "Thank you," Lena said, accepting the check, her voice steady. The crowd clapped, some in disbelief, as Cecilia joined volunteers, passing out cobbler. The moment captured online trended with Frice Lena's Hearth, proof that even old wounds could heal. Yet prejudice lingered, sharp as a blade. A reporter, emboldened by the tabloid, cornered Lena after her speech. "How does a black woman from Harlem," he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism, "overcome the odds in a white-dominated industry?" Lena's long hair framed her face as she met his gaze, her mother's ring warm on her finger. "By baking better, loving harder, and sharing more than they ever will," she said. The crowd cheered, the reporter retreating, his question a spark that only fueled Lena's fire. She'd faced this before, customers doubting her, Victor's lies, Cecilia's scorn. But each jab made her stronger, her mother's lessons her shield. A quieter moment came as Lena toured the center. She readied herself, flour dusting her hands from a demo class. A teenage boy, shy but eager, showed her his first cornbread, its edges uneven but warm. "My mom says you're like a superhero," he said. Lena knelt, her hair loose now, and smiled. "Your mom's the hero. I'm just sharing what mine taught me." The boy beamed and Lena's heart swelled, her mother's ring a steady pulse. This was her mother's legacy, not just bread, but hope, passed from one generation to the next. The center buzzed with trainees, their laughter echoing her mother's kitchen, a sound that drowned out the tabloid's poison. As dusk settled, Lena stood alone by the mural, her hair catching the fading light. The tabloid's words, Cecilia's, past cruelty, the world's doubts. They'd tried to dim her, but Lena's hearth shone brighter. She'd built this center not for fame, but for Harlem, for her mother, for every soul told they didn't belong. The copper ring gleamed, her mother's voice clear, bread for every soul. Lena's triumph wasn't just surviving the Dazzle ball or feeding thousands. It was creating a space where dreams could rise, where a black baker could rewrite the rules. The fight wasn't over, but Lena was ready, her hair a banner, her heart a furnace, burning with her mother's love. Autumn's crisp air swept through Harlem, carrying the scent of fresh cornbread from Lena's hearth to the streets that had cradled Lena Harper's dreams. At 32, Lena stood in her flagship bakery, her hair cascading like a dark veil over her shoulders, its sheen a quiet defiance against the world that had once called her nobody. The copper ring on her finger, her mother's heirloom, glinted as she packed loaves for a new shop opening in Chicago. Lena's Hearth was no longer just Harlem's heart. It was a movement, Its Bread for Every Soul program feeding thousands across New York, now reaching Atlanta and Chicago. The training center's success, a tribute to her mother, had silenced tabloids, but Lena's triumph over the Dazzle ball's cruelty and Cecilia's scorn felt incomplete. A new challenge loomed, one that would test the power of kindness itself. Lena's expansion was fueled by community love, but prejudice still shadowed her path. A Chicago food critic reviewing her new shop wrote a stinging piece. "A black baker's charity gimmick won't last in a real market." The words, laced with the same racism Lena had faced since the ballroom, cut deep. Her hair swayed as she read the article, her deep brown skin flushed with anger. The copper ring felt heavy, her mother's voice a faint whisper. Bread for every soul. Lena refused to retaliate with words. Instead, she doubled her free bread program in Chicago. She readied herself as she baked alongside new staff, their hands kneading dough in rhythm. The critic's words faded as locals lined up, their gratitude louder than his venom. A storm brewed closer to home. Ethan Caldwell, Lena's ex, whose betrayal at the Dazzle ball had scarred her, resurfaced on a local news channel. His restaurant chain was bankrupt, his golden heir status tarnished. In a live interview, Ethan stunned viewers with a public apology. "I was wrong," he said, his voice cracking, eyes fixed on the camera. "Lena Harper's the strongest person I know. I abandoned her, judged her for her skin, her dreams. I'm sorry." Lena, watching in her Harlem shop, her hair loose and framing her face, felt a jolt, not of triumph, but of unease. The ring her mother once gave warmed her finger, urging her to listen. Ethan's words were raw, but could a man who'd called her a mistake change? Social media erupted, some praising Ethan, others doubting his sincerity. Lena's response came not in words, but in action. She invited Ethan to volunteer at her training center, a test of his remorse. He arrived, awkward in an apron, his hands unsteady as he shaped dough beside Harlem teens. Lena, her hair tied high, watched closely. A boy, the same one who'd called her a superhero, nudged Ethan. "You messed up bad, huh?" Ethan nodded, his face flushed. "Yeah, I did." Lena's lips twitched, her mother's ring a steady pulse. Later, she pulled Ethan aside, her hair brushing her shoulders. "Words aren't enough," she said. "Help these kids, not me." Ethan agreed, his eyes earnest, and began mentoring trainees, his first step toward redemption. Lena didn't trust him fully, but she saw her mother's truth. Kindness could spark change, even in broken hearts. A quieter moment unfolded at the community kitchen where Lena's mother had once baked. Lena, her hair loose after a long day, visited to deliver surplus bread. A young volunteer, Marcus, approached, his voice shy. "I got turned down for jobs, 'cause I'm black," he said. "Your center gave me a shot." Lena's heart ached. The Dazzle ball's "black girls don't belong" echoing. She hugged him, her face tense. "You're enough," she said, echoing her mother. Marcus smiled, his story one of many trainees finding purpose, families fed, Harlem's spirit rising. The band that held her fire gleamed, a reminder that Lena's fight wasn't just against prejudice, but for those it sought to crush. Cecilia. Caldwell's transformation added a new layer. Once Lena's tormentor, she now volunteered weekly, her hands clumsy but earnest as she packed loaves. At a center event, Cecilia shared her story, her voice trembling. "I judged Lena for her skin, her roots. She showed me what strength is." The crowd, skeptical at first, clapped, moved by her change. Lena, her hair shining under the lights, nodded, her mother's ring warm. Cecilia's journey, like Ethan's, wasn't hers to judge. Kindness had planted seeds, and time would show their fruit. The moment trended online. Lena's heart, a beacon of hope, proof that even the hardest hearts could soften. As Lena prepared for a national conference, she readied herself, flour dusting her hands, and she felt her mother's presence. The Dazzle ball, Victor's lies, the critics' scorn. They'd tried to break her, but Lena's hearth had grown, not just in shops but in lives changed. Ethan's apology, Cecilia's redemption, Marcus's hope, they were ripples of her mother's legacy, proof that kindness could spread like wildfire. Lena touched her mother's ring, her hair a banner of resilience. She wasn't just a black baker, she was her mother's daughter, baking a world where no one was nobody, where every soul could rise. The Washington, D.C. convention, center hummed with the energy of 1,000 voices, its vast hall a mosaic of hope for the 2025 National Charity Conference. Lena Harper, 32, stood backstage, her signature dark hair cascading like a dark silk curtain over a tailored blazer, its sheen a quiet rebuke to the world that had once scorned her. Her deep brown skin glowed under the stage lights, her mother's ring on her finger, a gift from her late mother Harlem's heart pulsing with warmth. Lena's Hearth had grown from a battered shop to an empire feeding thousands, its light spreading to Chicago and Atlanta, fueled by kindness that had softened even Cecilia Caldwell's heart and sparked Ethan's redemption. But as Lena prepared to speak, the Dazzle ball's echoes, nobody, Black Baker, lingered, a final test of her resolve to share her mother's lesson with the world. The auditorium swelled with anticipation, attendees buzzing about Lena's journey, her viral storm-soaked triumph at the Brooklyn Food Festival a legend. Yet prejudice, ever persistent, slithered through the crowd. A man in a suit, his voice low but sharp, muttered to his neighbor, "A black woman from Harlem headlining? She's just a diversity pick." Lena's hair brushed her shoulders as she overheard, her fingers tightening around her mother's ring. The sting of racism, from the ballroom to tabloid sneers, was familiar, but Lena's heart held her mother's truth. Bread for every soul. She stepped onto the stage, her hair a banner, her presence silencing whispers. The crowd rose, their applause a wave that drowned out doubt, but Lena's eyes sought the horizon, her mother's spirit beside her. Lena's voice, clear and fierce, filled the hall. "They told me I was nobody," she began, her hair gleaming, to the spotlight. "7 years ago, they laughed me out of a ballroom, mocked my skin, my dreams, my hair. They said a black baker couldn't rise." The crowd leaned in, riveted as she recounted the wine-stained dress, Victor's lies, the stolen recipes. "But my mother taught me that kindness is a seed," she said, her resolve glinting. "Plant it, and it grows beyond hate, beyond storms, beyond those who say you don't belong." She shared her journey, feeding Harlem, building the training center, forgiving Cecilia, each word a testament to her mother's legacy. The crowd hung on every syllable, some wiping tears, others nodding with fierce pride. A challenge flared, sharp and public. A reporter, emboldened by skepticism, stood during the Q&A. "Ms. Harper," he said, his tone laced with condescension, "how does a black woman from Harlem compete in a white-dominated industry without cutting corners?" The crowd gasped, the question a dagger echoing the Dazzle ball's cruelty. Lena's hair swayed as she leaned into the microphone, her eyes blazing. "I don't compete," she said. "I create. I bake better, love harder, and share more. My mother fed the hungry with nothing. Her corners were never cut, and neither are mine." The crowd erupted, their cheers a thunderclap, the reporter shrinking into his seat. Lena's long hair framed her face, her inheritance in metal a beacon of her unyielding spirit. A quieter moment anchored her. Back in Harlem, days before the conference, Lena had visited the community kitchen where her mother once baked. Her hair loose, she'd stood among volunteers, the scent of flowers stirring memories of childhood, her mother's hands guiding hers, her hair then in braids, laughter warming the air. A girl no older than 10 approached, clutching a homemade cookie shaped like a heart. "You're my hero, Miss Lena," she said, her eyes bright. Lena knelt, her face tense, and hugged her, tears welling. "You're mine," she whispered, her mother's ring warm. The girl's gift, now tucked in Lena's pocket, grounded her speech, a reminder that her mother's kindness lived in every soul she touched. On stage, Lena shared the girl's story, her voice trembling with emotion. "This isn't about me," she said. It's about the kids I train, the families I feed, the hearts we lift. They called me a black baker, a nobody. I'm my mother's daughter, and her lesson is this: kindness blooms where hate withers. The crowd stood, their ovation shaking. The hall, some chanting Lena's Hearth. Lena's hair shone, her mother's mural flashing in her mind. A woman with a tray of bread smiling, warmth pulsing from her finger pulsed, a heartbeat linking past and present, Harlem to the world. And as Lena left the stage, a final spark ignited. Cecilia, now a dedicated volunteer, met her backstage, her eyes soft. "Your mother would be proud," she said. Lena nodded, her hair brushing her shoulders, the weight of Cecilia's past cruelty fading. Ethan, too, had changed, mentoring kids at the training center, his apology a seed that had grown. Lena's Hearth wasn't just shops or centers, it was a legacy of kindness, transforming Harlem, softening hearts, proving that a black baker could reshape the world. Lena touched her mother's ring, her mother's voice clear. "You're enough." The Dazzle ball's pain, the tabloid's lies, the reporter's jab. They were shadows eclipsed by a light that would never dim. Lena Harper's journey, from a wine-stained dress to a bakery empire, shows us that kindness can bloom where hate tries to choke it. What did her story stir in you? Drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, your dreams, or a time you rose above the noise. Your voice matters, just like Lena's bread-fed souls. Thank you for joining us, for letting this tale warm your heart. Subscribe and hit that bell to catch more stories that light up the dark. We'll see you soon, ready to bake new dreams together.